It pleased Darius to appoint 120 satraps to rule throughout the kingdom, with 3 administrators over them, one of whom was Daniel. I don't know how big these satrapies were. It doesn't say there were 120 satrapies, just 120 satraps. Those are the people in charge of the province. The satraps were made accountable to them so that the king might not suffer loss. In other words, they wouldn't cheat on their taxes, basically, is what that is. They would not defraud the king of his tribute. Now, Daniel, again, this guy is referred to as a king. This is not just a governor. This guy is consistently referred to as a king. There has been a theory in some circles, which I myself have considered credible for at least a period of time, that there was a guy named Gubru who was appointed governor of this province by Cyrus, and that's what this is. But Gubru was never a king. He was a governor, and this text seems to be calling this fellow a king pretty clearly. Gubru also apparently died not long after Babylon fell, so I don't think it could be him. Anyway. Now, Daniel so distinguished himself among the... Now, Daniel would be in his 80s at this point. Okay, this is 539, 538. We don't know exactly when this is. We don't know how soon after the previous chapter this is taking place. Probably within a year or so. If Babylon fell on October 12th, 539 BC, this incident is probably happening within a year of that. This is probably, if Darius the Mede is Xerxes II, he only lived a couple of years after he became king at this point in time. So he only lived so it would have to be within a year or so of the fall of Babylon, because if Xerxes II only lived a couple of years after that point. And just in general, as they're organizing their new government, this would happen fairly soon. Maybe not immediately, but fairly soon. So Babylon fell on October 12, 539 BC, so this is taking place sometime in the next year or so after that. And Daniel was taken captive, remember, in 605 BC. That was almost 70 years ago. So Daniel is an old man, at least 70 years old. He was already apparently a young man, at least 12, maybe, when he was chosen to be in the honor program, basically. We would think of it now almost like a high honor roll student in high school. And he would have been old enough to be in that position, which means he was probably a teenager at that time. That was 70 years ago. So we're talking about a man now who has got to be at least in his early 80s, if not even older. Now, Daniel so distinguished himself among the administrators and the satraps by his exceptional qualities that the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. So he wanted him to be his number 2. Belshazzar made him his number 3 on his very last night. Now he's going to be number 2. At this, the administrators and the satraps tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel in his conduct of government. So they didn't want him to be in charge of government affairs, but they were unable to do so. So the incoming administrators did not want, and some of them probably were the same Babylonian administrators who had been there. I mean, one of the things about the Persian system of government is that they kept a lot of the previous officials in the kingdoms that they conquered in order to keep things running smoothly and keep the populations, from rebelling. So a lot of these people probably were already Babylonian officials. They're probably not most of them probably are not brand new to the scene. And it could be that they had wanted Daniel out of the picture for some time anyway. As we read about in chapter 5, it seems as though Daniel had been kind of either maybe retired, maybe voluntarily stepped back, or maybe he had been squeezed out of the picture somewhat. He was not at the feast with Belshazzar. He was not consulted immediately when they needed wise men to interpret the dream, the writing on the wall. It took the queen mother, who was older, the mother of the king, who remembered the days when Daniel served under Nebuchadnezzar, to come and name him as someone to come and solve this problem. So it seems as though he was in the city. I mean, he was in the city. So he was within reach, but it seems as though he was somewhat inactive at that point in time. So it could be that a lot of these officials that were competing with Daniel for the spot had already been competing with Daniel even back before this, it had already kind of like wedged him out of the picture. And now that he was being promoted again, they were trying to kind of squeeze him out again. I think that's likely. It doesn't actually say that, but that seems very likely to me. Anyway, at any rate, however, whatever the backstory here is, and I don't know if it's all 120 of them. Okay, I don't know how many. It says that Darius was going to appoint 120 of these people. I don't know if this was all 120 of them, or if he had even assigned all 120 of these people yet. But just some of these people, some of this crowd, some of the people who were competing for the position that Daniel ends up getting, wanted to remove him from the competition, wanted to get him out of the way. But they were unable to do so. So they were trying to find charges against Daniel, find grounds for charges against Daniel as a conduct of government affairs. But they were unable to do so. They could find no corruption in him because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent. Oh, if we only had politicians today who could fit that category. If only. Finally, these men said, "We will never find any basis for charge." And I don't get this. Did it take him a month? Did it take him a year? I don't know. How long did it take him to do this? A week? A month? 2 months? 3 months? 6 months? I don't know. But eventually they realized that we will never find any basis for charges against this man Daniel, unless it has something to do with the law of his God. So they're going to have to create a situation in which the law of Daniel's God conflicts with the law of the king. So to do that, they're going to have to make a new law to create this conflict. So basically they're writing a law for the strict purpose, the sole purpose of making sure that Daniel breaks it. And that happens. Okay, that happens. We've even seen that happen in today's day and time. The previous president, Donald Trump, was so hated by his enemies that they started talking about writing laws just so that he would break them and give them a chance to accuse him of something. Like this sort of thing happens all the time. It's not all uncommon. It's not all just in the past. So they're going to try to write a law just solely for the purpose of making sure that Daniel breaks it and gives them a reason to accuse him. So the administrators and the satraps went as a group to the king and said, "O King Darius, live forever." Again, this is king language here. This is not governor language. They're not calling him governor. They're not calling him number two. They're not calling him Mr. Subordinate of the king. They're calling him the king. They're saying, "King, live forever." So whoever this guy is, they viewed him as the top dog, the man in charge. Again, he doesn't appear to have led the assault of Babylon. He received the kingdom. He didn't take the kingdom. So he's not Cyrus and doesn't appear to have doesn't appear to have conquered the battles that Cyrus conquered, but he is the king. O King Darius, live forever. The royal administrators, prefects, satraps, advisors, and governors have all agreed that the king should issue an edict and enforce the decree that anyone who prays to any god or man during the next 30 days, except to you, O king, shall be thrown into the lion's den. Now, again, a governor wouldn't have the authority to issue an edict like this, because someone doing this would basically be saying you can't even report to the primary king. You can't even report to my higher head of state. A governor wouldn't be able to do that. Essentially, what they're trying to get him to do here is make himself the end-all, be-all stop for all official requests or proclamations. Now, O king, issue the decree and put it in writing so that it cannot be altered, in accordance with the laws of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be repealed. So, King Darius put the decree in writing. Now, when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room, where the windows opened toward Jerusalem. 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God just as he had done before. Now, Solomon had told them to do this back when he dedicated this temple way once upon a time. In his dedication prayer, which you read about in 1 Kings chapter 8. Let's see here. Well, all throughout the chapter, the dedication prayer, he talks about praying in the temple. And he says here, starting in verse 46, chapter 1 Kings 8, 46, when they, the people, sin against you, for there is no one who does not sin, and you become angry with them and give them over to the enemy, who takes them captive to his own land, far away or near, and if they have a change of heart in the land where they are held captive, and repent and plead with you in the land of their conquerors, and say, we have sinned, we have done wrong, we have acted wickedly, and if they look to you, turn back to you, with all their heart and soul, in the land of their enemies took them captive, and pray to you toward the land you gave their fathers, toward the city you have chosen, the temple I have built for your name, then from heaven your dwelling place, hear their prayer and their plea, and uphold their cause. So Daniel is taking this very literally. He is opening up his windows and praying facing Jerusalem, facing the temple. Apparently he did this, now this is in his house, okay, it's in his upstairs room, but he opened the window, and I guess was speaking out loud. He was not praying silently, he was speaking out loud. And apparently he did not mind it if people outside his house heard him. I mean, people do hear him. Now this is a little different from what Jesus says about the Pharisees in the future, because they like to pray in the streets and lift their hands up to heaven so they can be heard. I think Daniel is praying in a way that he doesn't mind being overheard by people outside his window. But I don't think he's praying with the same attitude the Pharisees were praying when they prayed publicly in the streets about how awesome they were and how glad they were that God made them so awesome instead of somebody else. I don't think Daniel's praying like that, but he does seem to be praying in a way that is at least somewhat intended to be heard publicly, or at least he doesn't mind being heard publicly. 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God, just as he had done before. Then these men went as a group and found Daniel praying and asking God for help. So they were outside his window somehow, hearing him talk. So they went to the king and spoke to him about his royal decree. So Daniel has given them exactly what they want. And Daniel probably would have known this. He's old enough and experienced enough at this point that he probably knows this law was written just as a trap for him. And he's going to pray anyway. He's not going to let that stop him. So they went to the king and spoke to him about his royal decree. Did you not publish a decree that during the next 30 days, anyone who prays to any god or man except to you, O king, would be thrown in the lion's den? The king answered, the decree stands, in accordance to the laws of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be repealed. And again, clearly here, the Medes and Persians are described as being an alliance, and a kingdom that's made up of both of them. So the Persians didn't conquer the Medes. It's inaccurate to call the Medes a conquered people group by the Persians, because then it would just be the Persian Empire. It wouldn't be the Medo-Persian Empire. They'd be the same as the Lydians, the Babylonians, or the Egyptians, or the other people groups that Persia conquered. So they were together at some point at the beginning, somehow or another, and we don't really know exactly how, because we have no actual information from the Medes and the Persians themselves. All our information comes from either the Bible or from the Greeks. And we don't really know exactly how they came together, but somehow they did. Then they said to the king, now they got you. This is what they wanted. This is what they wanted right here. Daniel, who was one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, O king, or to the decree you put in writing. He still prays 3 times a day. When the king, okay, that's it. That's it. When the king heard this, he was greatly distressed. He was determined to rescue Daniel and made every effort until sundown to save him. I'm reminded of when Potiphar, back in the days of Joseph in Genesis, was angry when he heard his wife tell him about Joseph's so-called attempts to rape her. It doesn't say that he was angry. It says that he was angry. It doesn't say why he was angry or what he was angry at. It says that he was angry. I think he was angry that he was going to be losing Joseph. I don't think he was necessarily angry at Joseph. If he had been angry at Joseph, he probably would have had him killed. Darius is not angry at Daniel. He's angry that he has allowed himself to be fooled or distressed. He's allowed himself to be fooled into writing a law to entrap Daniel. Then the men went as a group to the king and said to him, "Remember, O king, that according to the law, the Medes and the Persians, no decree or edict that the king issues can be changed." So the king gave the order, and they brought Daniel and threw him into the lion's den. The king said to Daniel, "May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you." The king is not at all certain that God can do this. He's just hoping that he can. The stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the rings of his nobles, so that Daniel's situation might not be changed. Then the king returned to his palace and spent the night without eating and without any entertainment being brought to him. And he could not sleep. He couldn't eat, he couldn't sleep, he couldn't find any pleasure in anything. I don't think he was deliberately fasting, honestly. It says without eating. People might take that to mean fasting. I don't think he was fasting, or at least not on purpose. I just think he was so worried he couldn't eat. Have you ever been that way? Where you just get so nervous or whatever with something that you literally just can't eat? Even the thought of eating makes you sick? I think that's what he was. At the first light of dawn, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. So as soon as he could. As soon as he had the clearance and the excuse to do so, he could. When he came near the den, he called to Daniel in an anguished voice. So he didn't think that Daniel was still alive. He was anguished. "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions?" Daniel answered, "O king, live forever." Again, Daniel's referring to this guy as a king, not as a governor. "My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent in his sight. Nor have I done any wrong before you, O king." The king was overjoyed, and gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den. And when Daniel was lifted from the den, no wound was found on him, because he had trusted in his God. I don't know exactly how this den was set up. I'm not sure if we found any leftover lions' dens in that area. Apparently, there were two, just like the furnace from Nebuchadnezzar's furnace, chapter 3, there was a vent on top that they apparently threw the guys in, and there was a window on the side that Nebuchadnezzar could somehow see through, from some distance away at least. It seems as though there were two ways in or out of this den. There was a mouth of the den, apparently, that they could throw him in and set a stone over it. And that indicates to me that that was like something you could walk in or walk out of. Like it was like a cave or something, or a recess in the ground that you could walk in. Otherwise, they wouldn't need to roll a stone over it. If Daniel was dropped in a pit, they wouldn't need to roll a stone over the pit because he wouldn't be able to get out anyway. So there was some kind of a chamber that you went down into that you rolled a stone over somehow. And then there appears to have been an entrance in the top, which is how they got him out. They seem to have got him out a different way than they put him in there. I don't really know, though. So there might have been like a two rooms in this chamber. But I honestly don't really know. I don't quite understand how this den was set up, but anyway, they got him out. They lifted him up somehow. So he was lifted up. At the king's command, the men who had falsely accused Daniel were brought in and thrown into the lion's den, along with their wives and children. Now, there you have another example of your sin can have repercussions beyond just yourself. You're not necessarily going to be the only one who experiences the repercussions and the consequences of your sin. I don't know if their wives may have been somewhat, their wives may have given them the idea, who knows. Their kids probably didn't, but they're all being held responsible, even if they were or not. But that's just another, and that seems cruel, and it probably is, but it's another one of those examples where your sins can have repercussions that rebound beyond just you. Even if you think you're going to get away with it, and even if you think, well, even if I don't get away with it, I'll be the only one who suffers from it. Well, that may not be the case. That may not be the case. And before they reached the floor of the den, so they were dropped in somehow. I guess it was a hole from the top. Now, there would have to be an entrance to get the lions themselves in and out. I mean, I don't know how this worked. I really don't. But apparently it was some kind of a pit. But you would still need an entrance to get the lions in and out in the first place. So, I don't know. But apparently they had some kind of opening that you could drop things, food or whatever down in. I don't know why they were keeping lions in a pit anyway. Like, I don't, maybe they did this regularly. Maybe throwing people to lions was common. I just don't know. I mean, the text just doesn't go into any of that. Along with their wives and children. And before they reached the floor of the den, the lions overpowered them and crushed all their bones. The lions were hungry. The angel did not satiate the lion's hunger. He just simply shut their mouths. And I guess he held their paws down too, so they didn't even swipe at Daniel. Then King Darius wrote to all the peoples, nations, and men of every language throughout the land. May you prosper greatly. I issue a decree that in every part of my kingdom, people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel. Again, he's acting like a king here, not like a governor. He's not acting like a subordinate. He's acting like the top guy in charge. For he is the living God, and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. So this guy has learned the same lesson that Nebuchadnezzar finally learned in chapter 4. Belshazzar never learned this lesson. So Belshazzar died. But Darius the Mede, whoever he is, and Nebuchadnezzar did learn this lesson. So they ended up turning out well, I guess, in the end. So Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. Those are two separate guys. The text can, some people say the text can be read to say that they're the same person, but I believe Darius the Mede and Cyrus the Persian are two separate individuals. I don't know how long into the reign of Cyrus the Persian Daniel lasted. Like I said, Daniel will be at least in his early 80s at this point, so I don't think he would have lasted. Now, Cyrus the Persian himself doesn't stay king for very long. He ends up dying around the year 530 BC, which is only a few years after this. About 8 years, maybe. It's possible that Daniel outlived Cyrus the Persian. If he stayed in the administration of Babylon, Cyrus the Persian dies about 8 years from now, and Daniel would be maybe in his early 90s. It's possible that Daniel actually outlived Cyrus even. We don't know. I don't know how far into Cyrus's reign Daniel goes. I just know he's still there and Cyrus is on the scene and still prospering, at least the beginning of Cyrus's reign. But Cyrus's reign itself wasn't very long, so he could potentially have outlived even Cyrus, but I don't know that. Okay, so that's it for the historical portion of Daniel. We're only halfway done with the book, and now we have the difficult part, the interesting part. We have Daniel 7 through 12, and this is where Daniel records all of his own dreams and visions. Up until now, he has not been doing that. He's been recording things that happened to him or his friends, and visions and dreams that other people have had that he has interpreted for them. But he has not recorded for us yet his own dreams and visions. And he did have his own dreams and visions, which we'll read about starting in chapter 7.